Welcome back, Pokemon fans. It's been a long time since I posted a new video, so thank you for waiting for this one to come out. Today is the day where I will finally sit down and go through the top 5 things I liked and disliked in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Now, it's worth mentioning that I love Pokemon as a franchise, and these are just my opinions. Something I love, you may hate, and something I hate, you may love, and that's okay. It's just the opinion of a random stranger on the internet after all. Also, before this video goes in, it will contain spoilers, you know, because I'm gonna be saying what I like and don't like in a game, so yeah, spoiler warning. And before I get into the real list, I am gonna mention a few things that won't be on either the top 5 like or dislike list, either because I don't have a strong opinion on it or because it's a feature I simply didn't use. Playing with a friend or partner. I honestly never use this feature apart from summoning the free extra Pokeball to throw out the legendary birds. Your second player can't encounter Pokemon or battle on their own, so it just kind of feels like a feature that you use when mom tells you you have to play with your little brother. The Pokeball Plus and the Mew paywall. I really don't have much to say about this. I think it's a bit scummy that the only way to get Mew is by buying the extra cost accessory, but at the same time I feel like all those who really wanted to play this game as Nintendo wanted bought the Pokeball Plus anyway. I mean, heck, I even bought it long enough to figure out I didn't like it. You can re-challenge the gyms in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. This is awesome. Thank you, Nintendo. Targeted towards kids. All Pokemon games are targeted towards kids and new players as a general rule. Just because it's made for kids doesn't mean it should be watered down and extremely simple. Kids are smarter than that. Pokemon Go integration. I don't play Pokemon Go. It's a wasted feature on me and I really don't have an opinion on it. Gym requirements. To be honest, in my playthrough, I never ran into this as a problem. I simply always already had the requirements, and it wasn't until someone pointed out how much they could mess with Nuzlocke that I even understood that this could really be a problem. But because I never had an issue with them personally, I really can't rank them either way. And the last thing on this quick little lightning list is the nostalgia factor. It's almost impossible for me not to have some sort of good feeling while playing this game, and it's the same for a lot of people. Do I think that Nintendo was banking on that fact? Yes. Yes, I do. Does that mean that I can't form opinions that aren't colored by rose-tinted nostalgia glasses? No. No, it does not. Alright, now it's time to jump into the actual list of things I like and dislike. I'm gonna staircase this a bit by doing one thing I dislike and one thing I like, but it's worth noting that just because they appear in this order doesn't mean I necessarily dislike one thing above the other or like one thing above the other. It's just how I wrote it down. Now look, I already know that someone's gonna say, but Nady, you can use it as a handheld and then there isn't a motion control. And you're right, sort of. You still have to move the Switch handheld around a little bit, but it's doable. Unless you want to create any kind of content around Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, whether that be through streaming it on Twitch like I did, or making YouTube. This is YouTube, you guys, YouTube content. In which case you have to plug your Switch into a capture card and play it as a console. Now, when I first got my Switch, the first thing I did was buy a Pro controller because, generally speaking, if I'm gonna play a console, I prefer to have a controller. So imagine my surprise when I found out that Let's Go wasn't compatible with the Pro controller. You could either play it handheld, with Joy-Cons, or with the Pokeball Plus. Now, I wasn't a fan of the Pokeball Plus. Nothing bad against it, I just personally didn't like the feel of it. And since I couldn't play it handheld while live streaming, that left me with just the Joy-Cons. Well, no matter what I did, I could not get the feeling and cannot get the feeling for throwing a Pokeball with the Joy-Con. Half the time my throws went wide or totally the other way from the way I moved the Joy-Con, and yes, more than one time, my Joy-Con simply tired of being in my hand and went flying into my computer monitor. I kept hoping that similarly to Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon, if I just played through it enough, eventually I would get the option to turn off motion controls and just get to click a button to throw. But no, you are forced to use motion controls through the entire game, the entire post-game, and I did not like it, I do not like it, and unless something miraculous happens, I will continue to hate motion controls. Now this is a feature that the majority of Pokemon players have been asking for since Heart Gold and Soul Silver allowed our buddies to quite literally tag along with us as we walk through route after route of the game. Surprisingly for me though, this was never a feature I really liked, or cared about, or even really missed when it was gone. Sure, it was cool, but I never missed it. Imagine to my surprise when it became a favorite of mine in these games. Not only does your chosen partner now run, walk, jump, or even fly beside you through the entire game, but every single Pokemon has unique animations as they follow you around. Now that in itself already cemented this feature in my heart as a favorite from this set of games, but Nintendo did something that we've all been asking for since many of us watched the anime as kids. Something they teased us with in Generation 7 with Tauros. Riding Pokemon. Actually riding them around the map wherever we could. Sure, not every Pokemon can carry you through your journey together, and there were more than a couple that made me have a good laugh, like the idea of rolling through town on an Onix, and the fact that you can ride a Persian made me scratch my head a bit, since now I'm wondering if Giovanni in the anime was either a giant or his Persian was very small. But all that aside, the Pokemon you can ride on gave me a ton of joy. Racing through Kanto on the back of a Rapidash or flying high on a Dragonite were features that I really enjoyed. That being said, you may want to leave your high-soaring dreams for post-game, because it can be a little immersion breaking before you beat the game. Now before I get really into this one, let me just clarify that I don't dislike Pikachu or Eevee. I just don't like these particular two. I'm really not a fan that the game forced me to keep them with me throughout my entire game, but I understand that a lot of people get attached to their starter Pokemon and would have done that regardless. What really irks me about these two is basically how Nintendo made them your everything. Your Pikachu and Eevee now sub in as every single HM user in the game, including fly. Your Pikachu and Eevee are apparently pilots of a hot air balloon chair that can fly places. And on top of that, they get access to all the other HM moves available. Need to cross an ocean? Don't worry, they can both navigate a surfboard for you. Giant boulder taller than your head made out of solid rock blocking your path. Don't worry, apparently they have been taking their vitamins because they got this. It just seemed ridiculous, especially since this game allows you to access your PC box from anywhere. Why couldn't I just take my Machamp out of the box, have it push the rock, and then send him back to Professor Oak for some iced tea and a pat on the back? Now on top of your Pikachu or Eevee acting as a replacement for every HM user in the game, they also got some exclusive moves. Now in theory, that sounds awesome, since like in Pokemon Yellow version, your tiny tagalong refuses to evolve. Even though your rivals can, and will evolve. What a freaking Raichu. Now look, I was all for a move or two to help even the playing field, since I was evidently stuck with my partner through better or worse. What I was not expecting was for Nintendo to cater to what felt like a forced marriage between me and my Eevee by not only giving it exclusive moves of every single type, but all of these moves have a base power of Nady and a secondary effect, like knocking out all of your opponent's stat bonuses, causing status effects, or a chance to flinch your opponent, making me feel like, again, I just had to bring my starter with me everywhere because it was just so useful. Alright, so maybe at this point it's just me. Maybe everyone else really loves the fact that they get every single HM and a bunch of exclusive moves and they're super powerful, and they're thinking, Nady, you should really love this Eevee because it's overpowered and useful, right? Well, no, I still don't like it, but I can concede that point, however, unwillingly, that your Eevee or Pikachu are extremely useful in the game. However, I can and will still complain about the moves names, because holy shelter, they are terribly named. Just, how can you not roll your eyes at Splishy Splash or Zippy Zap or Buzzy Buzz or Batty Bad? That's just bad. Now, I mentioned this point a little bit earlier, but I really felt like it deserved an entire section on it because it's a feature I genuinely love. When Nintendo first announced Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee's whole capture instead of battling feature, I will admit that my first response was to complain about how much of a pain it was going to be to have to release all of those Pokemon one by one like we'd have to do in all the other games. But Nintendo addressed this potential issue by finally making a system to mass release up to 30 Pokemon at a time. Only in these games you're not so much mass releasing them as you are sending them to Professor Oak, so that he can research them and keep them forever. That feature alone would have made me content to move on and keep playing the game without any complaint, but Nintendo actually did one better. Now you can bulk release from anywhere in the game. No matter where you are, you can access your boxes filled with Pokemon and either change your party or release Pokemon that are sitting in your PC box. Gone are the days in Kanto where you as a player would have to run to the nearest Pokemon Center with the PC in the corner to change a party member around or release a fallen ally from a Nuzlocke. You can do it from anywhere you are, and I really hope this is a feature that will come into play for the next game. Hey guys, this is video editing Nady, currently coming at you. Before I show you any footage of what I recorded to get some trading footage for this video, I just want to say that this was not planned. This legitimately happened, and it took 3 attempts for me to be able to trade my moderator, Techie, who, by the way, did give me permission to leak our DMs here. Holy crap, this could not have gone any more perfectly awful. Alright, so now we get to my favorite part of any Pokemon game post-game. Battles and dex completion, which means trading and exchanging friend codes so that I can trade or battle with my friends. Except that Pokemon Let's Go doesn't have a friend system. Sure, you can battle or trade online, but only by inputting a code into your game and then having your friend input the same code into their game. These codes are picking 3 Pokemon out of an available 10. Pikachu, Eevee, Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, Pidgey, Caterpie, Rattata, Jigglypuff, or Diglett. So if I want to trade with my friend, I can make the code Bulbasaur, Jigglypuff, Caterpie, and then all they have to do is enter it on their side and boom, you can connect, trade, or battle to your heart's content. Now look, in theory this sounds amazing and extremely simple to use. But just because you inputted a code that was unique to you doesn't mean that someone else out there who isn't your friend hasn't used it too, and you will now connect with them instead of the person you were intending to connect with. I've only used this system to trade and battle about a dozen times, and out of those roughly dozen times, I got someone I didn't want to connect with about half the time. Maybe I'm extremely unlucky and I just picked codes that were too easy to put in, but that still leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth that this is something that can even happen. Especially since the Switch does have the ability to add and connect directly to friends within other Nintendo games. For all I complained about the Festival Plaza of Generation 7, at least I had the option to connect directly to this person I wanted. When it worked anyway. Now with a 3-digit code and only 10 digits to choose from, and a game as massive as Pokemon Let's Go with over 3 million copies sold worldwide and players from all over the world logging on, chances are that if you want to use online features, you are going to be paired with someone you didn't intend to be paired with at least once. If just 1% of the 3 million people were logged in on playing Pokemon Let's Go, that's 30,000 people playing the game at the same time. And if just 10% of those 30,000 people playing wanted to battle, trade, or go online in any way, that's still 30,000 people trying to make totally unique codes. I would have much rather just been able to add a friend from my Switch and connect directly. The code thing could be really cool if you wanted to use it as a Switch version of Wonder Trade, but as the primary way to connect and trade with friends, this feature just gets a big thumbs down from me. Now in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, by far one of the most debated on features is the fact that you can visually see Pokemon in the wild before you encounter them. For myself personally, this was a feature that when Nintendo first announced it, I was really mixed on it. Before playing the game, I was ready for it to be a gimmick that I enjoyed once and then hoped would disappear before the next main series game came out. But as I played through the game more and more, I found myself really enjoying seeing all the Pokemon around me. Seeing the Pokemon on every route of the game made every area and route feel incredibly alive and busy with activity. I got a small thrill the first time I ever saw a rare Pokemon pop up on my screen, and it's really cool from a shiny hunter's perspective to actually get to see a shiny Pokemon walking around next to its normal colored friends. However, I think personally the biggest reason I really like this feature was not because of the amount of Pokemon I could choose to encounter, but because of the amount I could choose not to encounter. Whether it's red or blue, leaf green, or fire red, my least favorite part of every single Kanto game up until now was walking through Mount Moon or Dark Cave and having to bulk buy a ton of repels before I lost my patience to the hordes of Zubat that would plague you through these caves. But because in Let's Go you can actually see the Pokemon running around, I could avoid them meaning that as long as you were paying attention and one didn't spawn directly under your feet, you could get through essentially any cave or route of the game without encountering any wild Pokemon if you didn't want to, and this was a feature I absolutely landed up loving. One of the things I loved in the first generation of Pokemon was the Safari Zone. It was such a different way to catch Pokemon in the game. Instead of battling, you used bait or rocks to increase your chances of catching a wild Pokemon, all while hoping they didn't flee as you hurled your precious Safari Balls at them. However, at no point, even as a young child, did I ever say to myself, I wish the whole game was the Safari Zone. Well, if you cut to Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, that's exactly what it is, because the entire game is the Safari Zone. Yep, in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, you do not battle with wild Pokemon to catch them. Instead, like the Safari Zone or Pokemon Go, you simply throw Pokeballs or berries in an attempt to catch whatever Pokemon has caught your eye. Now, that alone doesn't sound so bad, but when you take into account that catching these Pokemon are now the only way for your party Pokemon to gain experience besides trainer battles, you spend a lot of time catching mass amounts of Pokemon that you are just going to eventually mass release later. For the first couple hours of the game, I quite enjoyed this feature. It was fresh and new and a great change to the traditional Pokemon battle grinding I had to do before every gym. But 10 hours, a handful of badges, and some fully evolved Pokemon later, I was sick to death of catching my 100th Bellsprout, and I just wanted to return to the traditional grinding. Wild Pokemon can run away, break chains, and hop all over your screen like a 6-year-old on a pack of 5-hour energy drinks. It lost its shine for me really quickly, and I pray that the next game returns to the traditional catching and battling. Now we get to talk about the music, and it was really hard for me to be objective on this one, since Generation 1 of Pokemon was where I started my 20-year-long love of the series, and the music was automatically going to be something I loved and had really fond memories of. From entering gyms and hearing the uplifting beats to the overworld music exploring the routes with my chosen partners. But in these games, even the original tracks that are unique to this game are really well done, such as the Pokeball Plus theme. But if you were to ask me the point where I truly realized how much I loved the new remastered music, we'd have to take a walk all the way to the Hall of Fame and the music that plays when you realize you've beaten the game. During Red and Blue, this wasn't a track that stood out to me very much as a kid, and as an adult, it never so much as registered in my brain as a particularly memorable track. But cut to Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and while the base of the original music is there, it's been expanded on and added to and honestly been made an amazing track in its own right. The remastered music of Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee brought many smiles to my face for recapturing the amazing feeling that the original music brought to a younger me, but also for being amazing music in its own right. Now look, I must have tried to figure out a clever way to say this for over an hour. I typed multiple scripts and tried making compelling arguments, and at one point I even broke down and phoned a friend for help, and I could come up with no better way to say this than the game felt watered down. I get it. The argument that this isn't a core game and rather a spin-off has been said 1,000 times, and I agree. This is not a core game. That doesn't mean that it gets a free pass for what wasn't included though. There are no held items, abilities, breeding, fishing. There isn't even a day or a night cycle. When I heard we were heading back to Kanto, I was excited. Kanto had already had one remake that was part of the core series, and it was amazing. It added a ton of stuff while remaining true to the core series of games. Here was a game that once again had us heading back to Kanto, only it had a free pass to do even more because it wasn't a core title. It was a perfect way to test out a ton of new features and get a feel for people's reactions, all while being safely swaddled in a cozy nostalgia blanket. Instead, it felt incredibly lacking for me. Everything I was excited for faded pretty quickly when I realized that there was nothing new that I liked, but even some of my old favorites were removed. The chance to see Kanto at night, something that we've had since Generation 2, would have been amazing. All in all, I just felt like they removed a lot of the core elements that I've associated with Pokemon for years for the sake of adding extra visuals, which, don't get me wrong, were great, and that's actually going to be our next liked point, but as for as pretty as this game looks, it's shallow and lacks a lot of depth. Alright, let's end this video off on a positive note. Pokemon Let's Go introduced by far the most visually stunning graphics we have seen from any Pokemon game yet. That being said, because it's on the Switch, we did know that the graphics were going to be amazing, and the 3DS had pretty much hit its capacity for stunning visuals with Ultra Sun and Moon. But I wasn't expecting just how bright the game would be. I really don't know how else to say it, because everything was just gorgeous and bright. The world felt alive and happy, which in comparison to Ultra Sun and Moon's darker and generally more washed out color scheme was a real breath of fresh air. On top of that, Nintendo must have heard my salt-filled, angry cries about cutscenes in Generation 7 because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee did cutscenes right. For the most part, similar to Generation 1, any dialogue you got involved with could be skipped pretty quickly by spamming whatever the equivalent to the A button on the Switch is. And for the parts that weren't skippable, well, wow. Encountering the legendary birds was amazing. At one point during my playthrough, which I live streamed through the entire game, I was actually rendered speechless upon encountering the birds and the cutscenes for them that followed. And as far as the non-cinematic and unskippable cutscenes that every Pokemon game does have, they were also done really well. At no point did they ever feel excessively long or drawn out. Kudos for this one, Nintendo. You made an absolutely brilliant looking game. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching through this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below what some of the things you liked and disliked in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee were. Overall, I really enjoyed Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and even with everything I said I didn't like, I still think they are great games and a good example of what's coming to us for the Nintendo Switch. However, if I had a friend who was brand new to Pokemon, this just isn't the game I would want them to play first, which I think is a big part of why this game gets the amount of hate that it does. People were expecting the first game on a new console to be a shining example and a welcoming beacon to new players who would inevitably pick it up. But I did enjoy the games for what they were. A filler piece full of nostalgia to tide players over until the next main series game came out. I also want to give a special thanks out to my friends out on Discord for helping me with this video and for everyone who stopped by my Twitch channel during the live stream. If you guys enjoyed this video, I hope you'll click that sub button or leave a like on the video. And until next time, you guys, be safe out there!